Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The crystal chandeliers sparkled above the crowd of well-dressed guests mingling throughout the lake house. Merrick Holloway stood at the entrance, his custom-tailored suit a stark contrast to the memory of the second-hand clothes he'd worn as a kid in Detroit. He scanned the room, taking in the faces of his wife's family, people who smiled to his face while whispering behind his back 20 years of hard work had built CyberShield into one of the most respected security firms in the country. 20 years since he'd left those broken streets behind. Yet in the eyes of the Prestons, his wife's old money, Atlanta family, he remained an outsider. The street kid who got lucky. Merrick grabbed a glass of scotch from a passing server and took a sip, letting the burn distract him from the hollow laughter around him. The annual Holloway family reunion was Ophelia's idea. His wife thrived in these gatherings, the center of attention, the golden child who'd married well despite her family's misgivings. There he is, the man of the hour. Jackson Preston, Ophelia's father, clapped him on the shoulder with the forced enthusiasm of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. The old man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Jackson, Merrick nodded, maintaining the facade of respect they'd established years ago. Beautiful evening. Indeed it is. Your wife outdid herself again. Speaking of which, Jackson's eyes darted around the room. Have you seen Ophelia? Your mother-in-law's been looking for her. Merrick shook his head. I just arrived. The Singapore deal ran late. He checked his watch. He was 2 hours earlier than he'd told Ophelia he'd be. A surprise, he'd thought. A chance to see genuine joy on her face when he walked in unexpectedly. Ah, yes. Business always comes first with you, doesn't it? Jackson's tone carried an accusation Merrick had heard countless times before. It's what pays for all this. Merrick gestured to the opulent surroundings, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Jackson's smile tightened. Yes, well, we appreciate your contributions to the family. A burst of laughter from the back patio drew their attention. Merrick excused himself, moving through the crowd of unfamiliar faces and distant relatives who knew his name but nothing of who he was. The night air felt cooler as he stepped onto the patio overlooking the lake. Lights strung across the wooden rails cast a warm glow over the dozen or so guests gathered there. Merrick's eyes automatically sought out his wife's familiar form. When he found her, the world stopped. Ophelia stood near the railing, her back to him. Her midnight blue dress hugged her figure, her dark hair cascading down her back. But it wasn't her beauty that froze Merrick in place. It was the man standing behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his lips pressed against her neck. Time seemed to slow. Conversations faded to background noise as blood rushed to Merrick's ears. He watched, paralyzed, as Ophelia turned in the man's arms, her red lips curving into a smile meant only for her lover. The scotch glass nearly slipped from Merrick's fingers. He tightened his grip, muscles tensing as 20 years of hard-earned control threatened to shatter. He recognized the man now. Victor Reeves, a so-called business consultant Ophelia had met at one of her charity galas. The man who'd been calling their house for business advice over the past few months. Merrick stepped forward, each footfall heavy with purpose. The crowd instinctively parted, sensing the storm brewing. A few guests fell silent, eyes widening as they followed his gaze to the couple by the railing. Ophelia laughed at something Victor whispered in her ear. The sound, once Merrick's favorite melody, now cut like broken glass. She turned slightly, still unaware of her husband's presence, and that's when she saw him. For a split second, surprise flickered across her face. Then something else. Something that chilled Merrick to his core. Not guilt. Not shame. Amusement. Merrick continued his approach, aware of the hush falling over the patio. His jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth as he watched Ophelia casually disentangle herself from Victor's embrace. She didn't rush, didn't panic. Instead, she straightened her dress with practiced ease, as if being caught in another man's arms was merely a minor social faux pas. You weren't supposed to be here this early, babe, she said, voice carrying across the now silent patio. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, eyes meeting his with a coolness that made his blood boil. Victor, the smug bastard, didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. He simply reached for his drink, taking a slow sip of what Merrick recognized as his own rare bourbon, a $5,000 bottle he kept locked in his private cabinet. "And you weren't supposed to be a liar," Merrick replied, voice low and dangerous. Gasps erupted around them. The drama-hungry relatives who'd never accepted him now had front-row seats to the spectacle they'd probably been anticipating since the wedding. Ophelia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. She had the audacity to look offended, placing a manicured hand against her chest before letting out a breathy laugh that echoed across the water. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic, Mayor. We needed this." The nickname, once an endearment, felt like acid on an open wound. "Needed what exactly?" Merrick asked, stepping closer. "To make a fool of me in front of everyone? To throw away 8 years of marriage?" Victor cleared his throat. "Look, man, this isn't what it—" "Shut up." Merrick cut him off without taking his eyes off Ophelia. "I'm not talking to you." The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the promise of scandal. Merrick could see Jackson Preston at the edge of the gathering, his expression a mixture of disgust and vindication. The old man had warned his daughter about marrying beneath her station. Now he had his proof. Ophelia stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Not here, Merrick. We can discuss this later." "Why wait?" Merrick countered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Seems like you've made your decision. I'm just catching up." Something flashed in Ophelia's eyes, a calculation, a pivot in strategy. She moved closer, placing a hand on his arm that he immediately shook off. "Baby, you've been so busy," she said, her voice shifting to the honeyed tone she used when asking for expensive gifts. "You're barely home. What was I supposed to do? Keep your vows," Merrick suggested, his tone cutting. "Or at least have the decency to end things before moving on." Ophelia's facade cracked slightly, irritation seeping through. "It's not that simple. It never is with you." A terrible suspicion began forming in Merrick's mind. He pulled out his phone, ignoring Ophelia's sudden, tensing .3 taps, and he was in his banking app. The accounts they shared showed normal balances. But when he checked his business reserves, the separate accounts only he should have access to, his stomach dropped. $0.00 across the board. $12 million. Gone. Merrick looked up slowly, newfound understanding dawning. This wasn't just about sex, was it? Ophelia's mask slipped completely, replaced by something calculating and cold. She glanced at Victor, who now looked decidedly uncomfortable. "Ophelia," Victor warned quietly. Not now, but she had already made her choice. Ophelia leaned in, the pretense of affection abandoned as she whispered, "You were too busy making money. You never noticed I had access. We needed it more than you." The admission hit harder than any physical blow could have. Not just betrayal of the heart, but a calculated, methodical theft of everything he'd built. Everything he'd worked for while growing up with nothing. Merrick asked, voice dangerously quiet. Ophelia shrugged, a cruel smile playing at her lips. "Victor has vision, plans that need funding. Your money was just sitting there, waiting for someone with real ambition." Around them, the crowd murmured in shock. Even in this circle of wealthy elites, such naked greed was rare to witness so openly. Merrick felt something shift inside him, a final thread of affection snapping, replaced by a cold, focused rage he hadn't felt since his days fighting for survival on Detroit streets. "You've made a mistake," he said simply. Ophelia laughed. "What are you going to do? Sue me? I know all your secrets. Merrick, we both know some of your early business deals wouldn't hold up to scrutiny." "I don't need to do anything," Merrick replied, his calm unnerving even himself. "You've done it all for me." Before Ophelia could respond, a loud bang shook the house. The patio doors flew open with enough force to crack the glass. Confusion rippled through the crowd as men and women in suits poured into the area, their expressions grim and purposeful. It was chaos. Guests scattered, drinks spilled, and above it all rose Ophelia's voice, high and panicked. "What is this? What's happening?" For the first time that night, Merrick smiled, The federal agents moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area and separating key individuals from the panicking crowd. Merrick stood his ground, watching the color drain from Ophelia's face as comprehension dawned on her that a woman in a sharp blazer approached Merrick, her badge identifying her as Special Agent Rivera with the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. "Mr. Holloway," she nodded respectfully. "Everything is proceeding as discussed." Merrick returned the nod. "Thank you, Agent Rivera." Ophelia's eyes widened, darting between them. "As discussed? What is she talking about, Merrick?" He turned to his wife, a strange calm settling over him now that the wheels were in motion. "You didn't just steal from me. You stole from them." Agent Rivera stepped forward, addressing Ophelia directly. "Mrs. Holloway, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of financial fraud, identity theft, and money laundering." Another agent approached, handing Ophelia a document. "We've been tracking unusual movements from accounts linked to stolen credentials for months. The money trail leads directly to you." Victor attempted to back away, only to find his path blocked by two agents. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "I had nothing to do with any of this." Ophelia's composure crumbled completely. She spun toward Victor, desperation etching her features. Tell them you handled everything." Victor's face hardened as he realized the magnitude of their situation. "I don't know what she's talking about," he said to the nearest agent. "Ophelia assured me these were legitimate business investments from her personal accounts." "You lying snake." Ophelia lunged at him, only to be restrained by an agent. "We did this together. You know we did." Merrick watched the spectacle with detached interest. 3 months ago, he'd noticed discrepancies in his accounts, small at first, then increasingly brazen withdrawals. Initial investigations had revealed sophisticated attempts to cover the trail, but not sophisticated enough for someone who'd built their career on cybersecurity. He'd contacted the authorities immediately, but kept monitoring the activity, gathering evidence while appearing oblivious. The stolen money had been transferred through a series of shell companies before landing in offshore accounts under Ophelia's maiden name. Ophelia turned to him, strategy shifting yet again. "Merrick, please," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes, tears he now recognized as completely manufactured. "We can talk about this. Whatever you think happened, I can explain everything." "Save it for your lawyer," Merrick replied, unmoved. Agent Rivera nodded to her colleagues, who moved in to handcuff Ophelia. "Ophelia Preston Holloway, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the Miranda rights continued, Merrick surveyed the shocked faces of Ophelia's family. Jackson Preston stood frozen, his wife Margaret clutching his arm, both looking as though their perfect world had just imploded. Which, in many ways, it had, thought Ophelia's voice rose above the agent's recitation. "You can't do this to me. Do you know who my family is?" No one moved to help her. Even Victor had been quietly separated from the group, providing information to agents in exchange for what Merrick assumed would be some form of leniency. Yes, they led Ophelia toward the exit. She twisted to face Merrick one last time. "This isn't over," she hissed, all pretense gone. "You'll regret this." Merrick met her gaze steadily. "I already regret every day I spent with you." The sharp intake of breath from the onlookers might have been satisfying under different circumstances. Now, it merely reminded Merrick that his most private humiliation had played out in front of an audience that had never respected him. After Ophelia was escorted out, Agent Rivera approached Merrick again. "We'll need you to come down to the field office tomorrow to make a formal statement." "Of course," Merrick agreed. "I'll bring everything I've compiled." She lowered her voice. "Fair warning, her family will likely hire the best defense attorneys money can buy." "Let them," Merrick replied. "The evidence is solid, and money can't fix everything." As the agents departed and the stunned guests began dispersing, Jackson Preston made his way to Merrick. The older man's face had aged a decade in the past hour. "Did you know?" Jackson asked, his usual arrogance replaced by something almost like respect. "About the money, I suspected," Merrick answered truthfully. "I didn't know how deep it went until recently." Jackson nodded, looking out at the lake where moonlight danced on the water's surface. The Preston name has never been associated with criminal activity. This will destroy Margaret. For a moment, Merrick almost felt sympathy for the man. Almost. I didn't ask for any of this, Merrick said. But I won't apologize for bringing the truth to light. Jackson turned to him, eyes narrowing. What will you do now? Merrick straightened his tie, decision already made. Now, I get to work. The morning after the arrest, Merrick sat in his home office, the large windows offering a view of Atlanta's skyline that once filled him with pride. Now, it only reminded him of everything Ophelia had tried to take. His laptop screen displayed multiple tabs, bank statements, property records, investment portfolios. Everything connected to the life they'd built together. Everything he now needed to disentangle, that a knock at the door interrupted his focus. Thomas Wu, Merrick's chief financial officer and oldest friend, entered without waiting for a response. You look like hell, Thomas observed, setting a coffee on the desk. Merrick ran a hand over his unshaven face. Feel worse. Thomas dropped into the chair opposite him. The team's in damage control mode. News hasn't broken yet, but it will soon. We need a strategy. Already working on it. Merrick gestured to the screen. How bad is it at the office? Contained for now. I've frozen all accounts Ophelia had access to and implemented the emergency protocols. But Merrick, Thomas leaned forward, lowering his voice despite them being alone. 12 million doesn't just disappear without consequences. Investors are getting nervous. Merrick nodded grimly. I've scheduled an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. In the meantime, I need you to help me with something else. He turned the laptop toward Thomas, revealing a complex diagram of interconnected accounts and properties. Everything in red is jointly owned or has Ophelia's name attached. I want it all back under my control by the end of the week. Thomas's eyebrows shot up. That's aggressive. So is stealing $12 million, Merrick countered. Thomas studied the screen. The vacation homes I understand, but her trust fund? Her personal investments? Merrick, that's legal. Merrick cut in. I had our legal team review everything this morning. The prenup, she insisted on, has a morality clause. Infidelity combined with criminal activity nullifies her protections. Thomas whistled low. She really didn't read the fine print, did she? She was too busy thinking she was smarter than everyone else. Merrick took a sip of coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. I want her to have nothing when this is over. Nothing she can use to rebuild. Revenge won't fix what happened, Thomas said quietly to Merrick's gaze hardened. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. And protection. As long as she has resources, she's a threat. Thomas nodded slowly, recognizing the resolve in his friend's expression. What do you need from me? Start with the Cayman accounts. They're technically under a shell corporation, but with the documentation I've gathered, we can prove those funds were illegally transferred. Merrick pulled up another file. Then move on to the properties. The lake house, the condo in Miami, the vineyard in Napa, and the New York apartment? The one her parents gave her before the wedding. Merrick's jaw tightened. Especially that. According to our agreement, any property brought into the marriage became jointly owned after 5 years. It's been 8. Thomas let out a low whistle. You're not leaving anything to chance. I can't afford to, Merrick replied simply. For the next several hours, they worked methodically, initiating transfer after transfer, filing paperwork with banks and property managers, contacting lawyers to begin proceedings where immediate action wasn't possible. By late afternoon, Merrick received a call from a private number. He hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. Mr. Holloway, the familiar voice of Agent Rivera came through. I wanted to update you. Your wife was arraigned this morning. Bail was set at $5 million. Merrick exchanged glances with Thomas. Has she posted it? That's just it. Rivera sounded puzzled. Her family's been unable to access the necessary funds. Apparently, there are holds on several of their accounts. How unfortunate, Merrick replied, evenly without a pause. Mr. Holloway, while the FBI appreciates your cooperation, we can't condone any actions that might constitute. Everything I've done is perfectly legal, Agent Rivera. I'm simply protecting my assets from further theft. Another pause. I see. Well, in that case, Mrs. Holloway remains in custody. Her preliminary hearing is scheduled for next week. Thank you for the update. After hanging up, Thomas looked at him with newfound appreciation. You froze the Preston accounts, too? Not directly, Merrick explained. But it seems Ophelia had been siphoning from her family as well. Once I flagged those transactions as potentially fraudulent, the banks had no choice but to implement temporary holds. Thomas shook his head. You're a terrifying man, Merrick Holloway. I'm a survivor, Merrick corrected, turning back to his laptop. Always have been. As night fell, Merrick's phone buzzed with messages from Ophelia's family, first pleading, then demanding, finally threatening. He read each one with detached interest before setting the phone aside. Let them rage. It changed nothing that a final email came through at midnight. From his lawyer, Phase 1 complete. All jointly held assets now under sole control. Proceeding with Phase 2 at dawn. Merrick closed his laptop and stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours of focused work. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, a universe of possibilities he'd once shared with a woman who'd never truly loved him. Tomorrow, he would begin dismantling every remnant of her presence in his life. Every connection, every relationship she valued, every safety net she might have counted on. By the time he was done, Ophelia Preston would be a ghost in her own life. 3 days after Ophelia's arrest, Merrick received an unexpected visitor at his office. Janet, his assistant of 7 years, appeared at his door with an unusual expression, a mixture of discomfort and curiosity. Mr. Holloway, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insistent. Merrick looked up from the contract he'd been reviewing. Who is it? Landon Preston. Janet lowered her voice. Mrs. Holloway's brother. Merrick leaned back in his chair, surprising himself with a small smile. Send him in. Landon Preston strode into the office moments later, his expensive suit and polished appearance a stark contrast to the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his jaw. Unlike his sister, Landon had always maintained a safe distance from Merrick, neither accepting nor rejecting him outright. Holloway, Landon nodded curtly. Preston, Merrick replied, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. To what do I owe the pleasure? Landon remained standing. You know why I'm here. My family is in chaos. Our accounts are frozen, our reputation is hanging by a thread, and my sister is in jail. All consequences of Ophelia's actions, Merrick pointed out calmly, none of which I caused. Don't give me that, Landon snapped. You didn't have to push for criminal charges. This could have been handled privately. Merrick studied the man before him. Landon Preston, the golden boy of Atlanta society, reduced to pleading in his brother-in-law's office. How quickly fortunes changed. Sit down, Landon, Merrick said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Let's talk like adults. Landon hesitated, then complied, sinking into the chair with barely contained frustration. Your sister stole $12 million from me, Merrick began. She conspired with her lover to commit fraud. She violated not only our marriage, but federal banking regulations. Tell me, what part of that should I have handled privately? The part where your vendetta is destroying innocent people, Landon countered. My parents had nothing to do with Ophelia's schemes. Merrick raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? Because the financial records show transfers from your family's main account to one of Ophelia's shell companies just 2 months ago. $3 million, to be exact. Landon's face paled. That's impossible. My father would never. Maybe not knowingly, Merrick conceded. But the transfers happened. And given Ophelia's skill at manipulation, I wouldn't be surprised if she convinced your parents it was for a legitimate investment. Silence fell between them as Landon processed this information. Merrick could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing loyalty against self-preservation. What do you want from me? Landon finally asked. Information, Merrick replied simply. I know Ophelia has resources I haven't found yet. Accounts under aliases, properties registered to friends, investments made through third parties. Landon's expression hardened. You want me to betray my sister. I want you to protect your family, Merrick corrected. The longer this drags on, the more collateral damage there will be. Your parents' reputation, your business connections, your social standing all at risk. And if I help you, then I make sure the Preston name is publicly separated from Ophelia's actions. I release the holds on your parents' primary accounts. And I ensure that when this story breaks in the media, your family is portrayed as victims of Ophelia's deception, not accomplices. Landon stood abruptly, pacing the length of the office. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I had to, Merrick said quietly. Your sister left me no choice. The minute hand on the wall clock ticked through 5 full revolutions before Landon spoke again. She has a private account in Zurich, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Under our grandmother's maiden name, Webster. I only know because I caught her transferring funds last year. Merrick nodded, making a note. What else? A condo in Paris. Purchased through a foreign holding company. I think it's called Blue Horizon or something similar. Landon wouldn't meet Merrick's eyes. And shares in a tech startup in Singapore. About $2 million worth last I heard. Is that everything? Merrick pressed. Landon hesitated. There's a storage facility in Buckhead. Unit 227. She keeps documents there. Financial records, passport copies, emergency cash. Merrick wrote down the information, then studied Landon's face. Why are you really doing this, Preston? It can't just be to protect your parents. A bitter laugh escaped Landon's lips. You think you're the first person she's betrayed? 6 years ago, she convinced our parents to reduce my share of the family trust to fund her humanitarian foundation. $3 million that disappeared into thin air. When I questioned it, she turned our parents against me, claimed I was jealous of her success. Understanding dawned on Merrick. You've been waiting for her to slip up. I've been waiting for justice, Landon corrected, a hard edge to his voice. Don't mistake this for brotherly betrayal, Holloway. Ophelia has been manipulating everyone around her for years. It was only a matter of time before she targeted someone who could fight back. Merrick stood, extending his hand across the desk. Thank you for the information. I'll have the holds on your parents' accounts released by the end of the day. Landon shook his hand firmly. What will you do with what I've told you? What I've been doing since the beginning, Merrick replied. Ensure that Ophelia has nothing left to rebuild with when this is over. After Landon left, Merrick immediately contacted his financial team, setting in motion the process to locate and freeze the newly identified assets. By sunset, Ophelia's Swiss account was flagged for investigation. The Paris property was under legal scrutiny, and the storage unit was being watched. That evening, as Merrick reviewed the day's progress in his home office, his phone rang. Ophelia's name flashed on the screen, a call from the detention center. He let it ring until voicemail picked up, then listened as the automated system recorded her message. Merrick, you've made your point. Her voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confidence. Call off your dogs. We can work something out that benefits us both. Please just call me back. He deleted the message without a second thought. Hours later, as Merrick prepared for bed, his security system alerted him to movement on the property. The camera feed showed a figure near the pool house, tall, male, moving with purpose. Merrick activated the silent alarm and reached for the handgun he kept secured in his nightstand. Years of threats from competitors and cybercriminals had taught him to be prepared. He moved silently through the darkened house, using the security feed on his phone to track the intruder's progress. The man had gained entry to the pool house and appeared to be searching for something. Merrick positioned himself at the connecting door between the main house and the pool area, weapon ready. When the door handle turned, he tensed. The intruder stepped through, flashlight beam sweeping the room. In the dim light, Merrick recognized Victor Reeves. Looking for something, Merrick asked, voice cutting through the darkness. Victor froze, slowly raising his hands as Merrick trained the gun on him. Holloway, let's be reasonable here. Breaking into my home seems pretty unreasonable, Merrick countered, reaching with his free hand to switch on the lights. Especially for a man facing potential criminal charges. Victor squinted in the sudden brightness. Up close, he looked disheveled, a far cry from the confident figure who'd held Ophelia at the party. They're watching me. I couldn't call. Who's watching you? Merrick kept the gun steady. Everyone. The feds, Ophelia's lawyers, probably your people too. Victor ran a hand through his hair. Look, I need to make a deal. I can tell you things about Ophelia's operation that nobody else knows. Merrick studied him with cold detachment. I don't make deals with home invaders, or men who sleep with other men's wives. You don't understand, Victor insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. She's got connections you don't know about. People who can make problems disappear permanently. I've seen it happen. Is that a threat? A warning, Victor corrected. Ophelia called me from detention. Said if I didn't recover something from your pool house, we'd both regret it. Merrick's eyes narrowed. Recover what, exactly? A USB drive, hidden in one of the decorative books on the shelf. Contains backup files of all her transactions. Insurance, she called it. Interesting. Merrick hadn't found anything during his initial search of the property. And you came running like a good little errand boy. Victor's face hardened. I came because I know what she's capable of. The people she works with aren't bankers and investors, Holloway. They're the kind who solve problems permanently. So you've said. Merrick motioned with the gun. Move toward the shelves. Slowly, Victor complied, moving to the built-in bookcase that lined one wall of the pool house. Under Merrick's watchful eye, he pulled out a leather-bound copy of The Art of War and carefully opened it, revealing a hollowed interior containing a small black USB drive. There, Victor said, relief evident in his voice. That's what she wanted. Put it on the table. Once Victor had complied, Merrick added, now step back. Merrick approached cautiously, never lowering the gun, and pocketed the drive. Now what? Victor asked, shifting nervously. You gonna call the cops? I should, Merrick replied. Breaking and entering carries a nice prison sentence. I gave you valuable information, Victor protested. That drive could be crucial evidence. Merrick considered him for a moment. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my property immediately. You're going to forget this address exists. And if Ophelia contacts you again, you're going to tell her you found nothing. And in return, I don't have you arrested tonight. Merrick's tone left no room for negotiation. But if I see you again, anywhere near me or my business, all bets are off. Understood. Victor nodded quickly. Crystal clear. Good. Now, get out. After ensuring Victor had left the property, Merrick examined the USB drive. This could be exactly what he needed to complete Ophelia's downfall, or it could be a trap. Either way, he wouldn't access it directly. His cybersecurity team would handle that, with all proper precautions. Merrick smiled grimly as he secured the drive in his safe. Ophelia was getting desperate, sending Victor to do her dirty work. And desperate people made mistakes. Mistakes he would use to finish what she had started. The preliminary hearing came and went, with Ophelia being formally charged on multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. Despite her family's efforts, bail had been denied after prosecutors presented evidence that she posed a flight risk evidence Merrick had helped compile, including details of her false identities and overseas connections. 2 weeks after her arrest, Merrick sat across from District Attorney Elena Morales in her downtown office. The large windows offered a view of the courthouse where, just hours earlier, Ophelia had appeared in an orange jumpsuit, her usual glamour replaced by institutional plainness. The USB drive contained exactly what we needed, Morales confirmed, tapping a thick folder on her desk. Transaction records, communications with offshore accounts, even conversations with some very interesting individuals we've been tracking for years. You're welcome, Merrick said dryly. Morales leaned forward. Mr. Holloway, I appreciate your cooperation in this case. But I have to ask, how did you obtain this drive? It was in my home, Merrick replied, truthfully, omitting the circumstances of its discovery. In a hiding place my wife thought I wouldn't check. The DA studied him for a moment before nodding. Well, it's admissible evidence regardless, and it substantially strengthens our case. What's the likely outcome? Merrick asked, though he already knew. With this evidence, Morales shrugged. Minimum 10 years. Possibly more, depending on how the conspiracy charges play out. Your wife was involved with some dangerous people, Mr. Holloway. Merrick absorbed this without visible reaction. What about Victor Reeves? Cooperating fully in exchange for immunity, Morales said. His testimony places your wife at the center of the operation. According to Reeves, she was the mastermind, not just a participant. That fits, Merrick agreed, thinking of Ophelia's calculated manipulations over the years. She'd always been 3 steps ahead, planning moves others couldn't see. Until now. There's something else, Morales said, her tone shifting. We've received intelligence that suggests Mrs. Holloway may be planning something desperate. Her last phone call from detention was to an unregistered number with connections to known criminal elements. Merrick straightened. What kind of something desperate? That's just that we don't know. But given her resources and connections, we're concerned. Morales fixed him with a serious look. I strongly suggest you take additional security precautions, Mr. Holloway. At least until the trial concludes. I always do, Merrick assured her, though the warning sent a chill through him. After leaving the DA's office, Merrick instructed his driver to take him to Cyber Shield headquarters. He needed to check on the company's recovery progress and ensure their new security protocols were being implemented properly. As they approached the sleek glass building that houses Life's work, Merrick's phone buzzed with a notification from his home security system. Someone had disabled the power to the main house. Change of plans, he instructed his driver. Take me home. Now. The drive felt interminable, each minute stretching as Merrick tried and failed to reconnect to his security system remotely. By the time they pulled into his gated community, dusk was falling, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. The house appeared normal from the outside, no signs of forced entry, no unfamiliar vehicles. But the absence of the usual soft landscape lighting confirmed the power outage. Wait here, Merrick told his driver. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, call this number. He scribbled Agent Rivera's direct line on a business card and handed it over. Approaching cautiously, Merrick entered through the side door, using the manual key since the electronic lock was disabled. The interior was eerily silent, shadows deepening as the last of the daylight faded. He moved through the house room by room, gun drawn, senses heightened. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet the stillness felt wrong somehow, like the house was holding its breath. In the main hallway, a floorboard creaked behind him. Merrick spun, weapon raised, and found himself face to face with Ophelia. She looked different, thinner, harder, her designer clothes replaced by nondescript dark clothing. But her eyes were the same, calculating. Cold. Hello, Merrick, she said softly. Surprised to see me? Merrick kept the gun trained on her. How did you get out? A smile played at her lips. I still have friends. Friends who owe me favors. You escaped custody, Merrick stated flatly. They'll hunt you down. Eventually, she agreed. But I needed to see you first. To finish this. Merrick noticed her hand shifting toward her pocket. Don't, he warned. Ophelia laughed, the sound hollow in the empty house. Going to shoot your wife, Merrick? Add murder to the scandal. Ex-wife, he corrected. The divorce was finalized yesterday. Judge granted an emergency petition given the circumstances. Something flickered across her face, anger, perhaps, or surprise that he'd managed to sever their legal ties so quickly. Doesn't matter, she said dismissively. None of this will matter soon. What are you planning, Ophelia? Merrick kept his distance, aware that even cornered, she was dangerous. I thought about killing you, she admitted with disturbing casualness. It would be easy, you know, but then I realized death is too quick, too merciful. Her smile widened. I'd rather watch you suffer. Watch everything you built crumble around you. Your threats mean nothing, Merrick replied. You've lost. Your accounts are frozen, your assets seized. Even your family has turned against you. At the mention of her family, Ophelia's composure cracked slightly. Landon, she hissed. He always was jealous of me. Did he tell you about the Zurich account? The Paris property? He told me everything, Merrick confirmed. You have nothing left, Ophelia. Nothing and no one. She took a step forward, forcing Merrick to tighten his grip on the weapon. I still have one thing you don't know about. One last card to play. Whatever it is, it won't work, Merrick said with certainty. Ophelia reached slowly into her pocket, ignoring Merrick's warning. She withdrew not a weapon, but a small remote control. I had this house wired months ago. Every room, every system. Merrick's blood ran cold as understanding dawned. You're bluffing. Am I? She pressed a button, and instantly, every light in the house blazed to life. Another button, and they went dark again. I know everything about you, Merrick. Your habits, your security measures, even the gun you're holding right now. Merrick's mind raced. If she had indeed compromised his home systems to this extent, what else might she have access to? What do you want? He asked, buying time as he calculated his options. I want to escape, she replied simply. Leave the country, start fresh somewhere my name means nothing. And for that, I need money. You're asking me to fund your disappearance. Merrick's disbelief was genuine. After everything you've done, I'm giving you a choice, Ophelia corrected. Transfer $5 million to an account I'll specify, and I vanish forever. Refuse, and I burn everything you love to the ground, starting with Cyber Shield's reputation. Merrick laughed, the sound surprising even himself. You really don't get it, do you? There's nothing you can do to me that's worse than what you've already done. Ophelia's expression darkened. I have documents, Merrick. Records of every shortcut you took building your company. Every gray area you exploited. One anonymous tip to the right regulator, and your precious reputation is finished. Go ahead, Merrick challenged. Those records are 15 years old. The statute of limitations expired long ago. And unlike you, I've been running a legitimate business since then. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Ophelia's face. She hadn't expected him to call her bluff. Now, Merrick continued, here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to put down that remote, and we're going to wait for the authorities, who should be arriving any minute now. As if on cue, distant sirens became audible, growing louder by the second. Panic replaced Ophelia's confidence. She backed toward the rear of the house. This isn't over, Merrick. It's never going to be over between us. It already is, Merrick replied calmly. I've won, Ophelia. I've taken back everything you stole, exposed every lie you told. You have nothing. She swallowed hard, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. I loved you once, she whispered, a last desperate attempt to find some leverage. In the beginning, it was real. No, Merrick said with certainty. It never was. Not for you. The sirens are close now, blue and red lights flashing through the windows. Ophelia glanced frantically around, like a cornered animal seeking escape. In that moment of distraction, Merrick lunged forward, knocking the remote from her hand and pinning her against the wall, careful to keep the gun away from her reach. Going somewhere, he asked, echoing her mocking tone from that first night of betrayal. She struggled against his grip, her facade finally crumbling completely. Please, Merrick, I loved you. He laughed, cold and sharp. No, you loved what I gave you. Now you have nothing. Ophelia crumpled, sliding down the wall as the fight left her body. What do you want? Revenge? To ruin me? Her voice broke, tears real ones this time, streaming down her face. Merrick crouched, looking her directly in the eyes. He tilted her chin up with 2 fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. Ruining you? That was easy. But no, I want you to live knowing I won. Every day in that cell, I want you to remember that you gambled everything and lost. The front door burst open as federal agents poured in, weapons drawn. Agent Rivera led the group, eyes widening at the tableau before her. Mr. Holloway, are you all right? Merrick stepped back, lowering his weapon. I'm fine, Agent Rivera. Mrs. Holloway was just leaving under your escort, of course. As they handcuffed Ophelia and read her new charges escape from federal custody, breaking and entering, attempted extortion, she kept her eyes fixed on Merrick, a mixture of hatred and defeat etched into her features. The escape was detected almost immediately, Rivera explained as her colleagues led Ophelia away. We tracked her here as soon as we verified the alarm at your property. Merrick nodded. She thought she could threaten me into financing her escape. She'll face additional years for this stunt, Rivera assured him. No possibility of parole now. As the last of the agents departed, Merrick stood in the empty hallway of the house that had never truly been a home. Tomorrow, he would put it on the market. Tonight, he would sleep in a hotel. This chapter of his life was closed. It was time to write a new 1.6 months later, Merrick stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his new office in Manhattan, watching the city prepare for evening. 52 stories below, people and vehicles moved like toys, a miniature world continuing its rhythm regardless of individual triumphs or tragedies. The CyberShield logo dominated the opposite wall, redesigned for the company's expansion. What had once been a regional security firm was now a national powerhouse, with international contracts pending and a staff that had tripled in size. Merrick adjusted his cufflinks platinum, a gift to himself to mark the occasion, and checked his watch. The board meeting would begin in 10 minutes, where he would unveil the next phase of the company's growth strategy. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His new assistant, Michael, entered with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Holloway, your next meeting is ready. The board members are gathering in the conference room." "Thank you, Michael," Merrick nodded. "I'll be right there." As Michael turned to leave, he hesitated. "Sir, there's also a personal message. From Agent Rivera." Merrick raised an eyebrow. "Oh, she said to inform you that the matter has been fully resolved." She mentioned a sentencing hearing. Merrick allowed himself a small smile. "Thank you for passing that along." After Michael left, Merrick returned his gaze to the city below. The matter Rivera referred to was, of course, Ophelia's case. The trial had been swift, the evidence overwhelming. 25 years without possibility of parole, a sentence practically unheard of for white-collar crime. But Ophelia's connections to international money laundering operations had escalated the charges significantly. The Preston family had retreated from public life, their reputation tarnished despite Merrick's efforts to separate them from Ophelia's crimes. Jackson had retired early, Landon had moved to Europe to manage their remaining investments, and Margaret had thrown herself into charity work, perhaps seeking redemption through good deeds. Victor Reeves had disappeared after testifying, likely changing his name and starting over somewhere his part in the scandal wouldn't follow him. And Merrick? He had emerged stronger. The sympathy of being the wronged husband, combined with his business acumen, had opened doors previously closed to him. Old money circles that had once sneered at his Detroit origins now welcomed him as one of their own, a man who had faced adversity and triumphed. He moved to the bar cart in the corner of his office and poured himself 2 fingers of aged bourbon, not the bottle Ophelia's lover had helped himself to, but a new one, purchased to mark new beginnings. He raised a glass slightly in a silent toast of victory. To survival. To the future. His phone buzzed with a reminder. The board was waiting. Merrick set down the unfinished drink and straightened his tie. This was what mattered now, the empire he was building, bigger and more secure than before. As he strode toward the conference room, Michael fell on a step beside him, reviewing the agenda. "The expansion proposal looks excellent, sir. The team has prepared all the materials you requested." "Perfect," Merrick replied, his mind already shifting to business mode. "And the security protocols for the new systems?" "Implemented as directed. Triple redundancy, isolated networks, and thorough background checks on all personnel with access." Merrick nodded approvingly. No one would ever have the opportunity to betray him again in business or in life. He had learned his lesson well. The conference room door. He paused, taking in the expectant faces of his board members through the glass. Men and women who respected him, who looked to him for leadership. This was his world now. "Send them in," Michael prompted gently. Merrick smirked. "Now let's build bigger. And if anyone tries to take from me again," he let the silence speak for itself as he pushed open the door to applause from his waiting team. In the end, the best revenge wasn't just surviving betrayal, it was thriving despite it. And Merrick Holloway was just getting started.